I'm actually very looking forward to this fight. This fight is very interesting. Other than the fact that these two are fighting for the vacant title when one, Zepeda's coming off a loss, and two, Hadia Herrera, who is the interim champion, it hasn't been made champion. The WBC can never be consistent. Ajit Kabiel was interim champion. Usyk vacated the belt. He's champion. But Hadia Herrera, he's interim champion. The title is vacant, and he doesn't get made champion. Instead, he just gets sidelined, and Zepeda gets to fight for it, who's coming off a loss. Roach gets to fight for it, coming off two draws. I mean, it's not so much of a problem with Roach fighting for it because he hasn't lost. And I believe his fight Cruz was an eliminator of sorts, which didn't have a winner in it. But at least put a fight between Herrera and Roach, at least, even if Herrera's a champion. I don't get it. With that being said, as far as the matchup goes, Zepeda is what, 5'9". He's a southpaw. He's a guy. He's a volume puncher. He likes to impose on size on you and throw a whole heap of punches. Not really a big puncher. He likes to overwhelm with work rate. Lamont Roach, he's a guy. He likes to take his time. He's a boxer puncher. He's very good at counters. Not the biggest puncher, but you don't really need to be a big puncher in order to do any damage to William Zepeda. Tevin Farmer had him hurt in the rematch. Tevin Farmer's not a big puncher. Tevin Farmer dropped him in the first fight. Jojo Diaz, I believe, caught him with a right hook, which hurt Zepeda in their fight. So you don't need to be a big puncher in order to cause Zepeda any issues. He's not exactly got the greatest punch resistance. And we know that Lamont Roach himself, even though he's not a big puncher, I do remember him hurting Jamal Herring badly with a left hook in their fight. And of course, he hurt Tank Davis with a right hand later on in the fight. And he also made Tank Davis take a knee from a jab. So if Lamont Roach lands in Zepeda, which he will at some point because Zepeda is not a great defensive fighter, don't be surprised if Zepeda got hurt. Zepeda is vulnerable to being out box, either for a full fight or for stretches of rounds, as he was against Tevin Farmer in the rematch at times, and in the first fight at times. And Shakur Stevenson, outboxed him. So Roach can definitely win rounds against Zepeda and at times, get the better of him in rounds. With that being said, though, Roach is not like Shakur Stevenson. Because Shakur Stevenson being he's not as fluid as Shakur Stevenson. He ain't as quick foot as Shakur Stevenson. He's nowhere near as defensively sound as Shakur Stevenson. He doesn't control range as well as Shakur Stevenson. Those are the things that Lamont Roach cannot do. Lamont Roach, I won't call him the slowest guy in the world, but he's a bit more flat-footed. He doesn't exactly, from what I've seen of him, he doesn't exactly move around the ring like that. He's a bit more of a flat-footed guy. He likes to plant his feet. He does have some fluidity to him. You see in the Tank Davis fight, but it's not on the level of even a Tevin Farmer in terms of foot speed or Shakur Stevenson. But that doesn't necessarily mean he won't be able to have success against William Zepeda, because Zepeda is going to be right at him anyway. Zepeda is going to give away, he only has like an inch and a half, inch reach, whatnot. But Zepeda is going to put himself in the line of fire, so he's going to leave himself open for counters, which Lamont Roach, I believe, would definitely exploit. However, Lamont Roach hasn't fought anyone with the work rate of Zepeda. There aren't really many fighters that can that have the volume of Zepeda. I'm not sure. I think at times Roach will have problems with the work rate of William Zepeda. Shakur, at least, he had problems with the work rate of Zepeda. I thought, even though I thought Shakur would beat Zepeda, I'm talking about way back, I do think that it was actually going to be one of his better fights because the styles, I think, Zepeda's work rate would at least keep, Shakur honest and force him to fight, which exactly happened, even though Shakur, beat him comfortably. I think with Roach, it'll be the same thing. I'm not sure how Roach will be able to handle Zepeda throwing a gazillion punches right at him. Again, he's not as fluid as Shakur, not as quick in the counter as Shakur, can't control distance. Shakur hasn't got as good as Shakur, isn't defensively as sound as Shakur. So I do think he will have a tougher time with Zepeda's work rate than Shakur did. So I do, and at times that Lamont Roach, he can Lamont Roach at times he can have a little bit of trouble, separating himself. I do remember the Tank fight. Even though I think he won that fight, there were so many rounds in that fight where there was barely any separation between the two, barely any. The early rounds there weren't really much going on. It wasn't until say the eighth or the ninth round when the fight really started to heat up, if memory serves me correct. So why you got someone like Zepeda who's constantly throwing a bunch of shots at you, and you're someone that kind of has a habit of not really separating yourself? Those are times where Zepeda can win some rounds. This should be a really, really interesting fight, though. Really interesting fight. I'm, I don't know. I'm not really sure who I'm gonna pick. I really am not sure. This is really a tough one. I can see how both men can win the fight. I can see how Zepeda can steal rounds based off his work rate, but I can also see how Lamont Roach can counter Zepeda in between, and maybe even higher at some point. I can see how, because Zepeda's not exactly the hardest guy to hit. He's not exactly the hardest guy to outbox. Lamont Roach is a competent enough boxer to do it, you know. But at the same time, William Zepeda's work rate, Roach hasn't really fought anyone like that, and he can be hit, he can be hurt. Pitbull Cruiser. Now, Zepeda, I don't think he's got at least the one punch knockout power Cruz, and I don't think Cruz is the biggest punch out there. But in terms of like one punch, just a one punch, I don't think Zepeda has that kind of power. Zepeda doesn't really hit hard; he just throws a lot of punches. But still, when you got a guy throwing constant punches at you constantly, there may be some times where it might be a bit overwhelming. You might get hurt a bit, you know. So that could happen to Roach maybe at times. He can be hurt, he can be hit at times. There can be times where he doesn't really do much. So I don't know. I really don't know. This is a really tough one. I think could be a really tough fight for both men. I actually do like this fight. So for now, I'm not. I don't know. For now, I'm not really picking. I'm not really picking for now. But I really do like this fight. So that's what I have to say about it. Can't wait for it. And that's my thoughts on it. I'm out.